What I just done read.
Hello everyone, all recovered I hope, and gearing up for the next bout of XS. So this will be the last one I do of these. Thank you for checking these ones out, and as always, if you do enjoy what I do here, across all of the various things that we do on the channel, then please do like, share, subscribe, share it out there if you know there's anybody who might enjoy this content. It really helps. So, to your good health. So yeah, another kind of longish one for you here, but hopefully you'll enjoy it. The following interesting letter, written by a member of a very distinguished English family, will furnish its own explanation. As you express a wish to know what degree of credit is to be attached to a garbled tale which has been sent forth after a lapse of between 30 and 40 years as an accredited ghost story, I will state the facts as they were recalled to my mind last year by a daughter of Sir William A.C., who sent the book to me, requesting me to tell her if there was any foundation for the story, which she could scarcely believe since she had never heard my mother allude to it. I read the narrative with surprise, it being evidently not furnished by any of the family, nor indeed by anyone who was with us at the time. Yet, though full of mistakes in names, etc., etc., some particulars come so near the truth as to puzzle me. The facts are as follows. Sir James, my mother, with myself and my brother Charles, went abroad toward the end of the year 1786. After trying several different places, we determined to settle at Lille, where we found the masters particularly good, and where we had also letters of introduction to several of the best French families. There, Sir James left us, and after passing a few days in an uncomfortable lodging, we engaged a nice large family house, which we liked very much, and which we obtained at a very low rent, even for that part of the world. About 3 weeks after we were established in our new residence, I walked one day with my mother to the banker's for the purpose of delivering our letter of credit from Sir Robert Herries and drawing some money, which, being paid in heavy 5-franc pieces, we found we could not carry, and therefore requested the banker to send, saying, "Well, we live at the Place de Lion d'Or," whereupon he looked surprised, and observed that he knew of no house there fit for us, except indeed, he added, the one that has been long uninhabited, on account of the Revenant that walks about it. He said this quite seriously, and in a natural tone of voice, in spite of which we laughed, and were quite entertained at the idea of a ghost, but at the same time we begged him not to mention the thing to our servants, lest they should take any fancies into their heads, and my mother and I resolving to say nothing about the matter to anyone else. "I suppose it is the ghost," said my mother, laughing, "that wakes us so often by walking over our heads." We had, in fact, been awakened several nights by a heavy foot, which we supposed to be that of one of the men servants, of whom we had 3 English and 4 French. Of women servants, we had 5 English, and all the rest were French. The English ones, men and women, every one of them, returned ultimately to England with us. Thank you for sharing. Anyway, a night or two afterwards, being again awakened by the step, my mother asked Cresswell, who slept in the room above us. "Well, no one, my lady," she replied. "It is a large, empty garret." About a week or 10 days after this, Cresswell came to my mother one morning and told her that all the French servants talked of going away, because there was a Revenant in the house, adding that there seemed to be a strange story attached to the place, which was said, together with some other property, to have belonged to a young man whose guardian, who was also his uncle, had treated him cruelly and confined him to an iron cage, and as he had subsequently disappeared, it was conjectured that he had been murdered. This uncle, after having inherited the property, had suddenly quit the house and sold it to the father of the man of whom we had hired it. Since that period, though it had been several times let, nobody had ever stayed in it above a week or two, and for a considerable time past it had had no tenant at all. "And do you really believe all this nonsense, Cresswell?" asked my mother. Well, I don't know, my lady, but there's an iron cage in the garret over your bedroom. Well, you may go and see it, if it please your lady. Of course, we rose to go, and just at that moment, an old officer with his Croix de Saint Louis called on us. We invited him to accompany us, and we ascended together. We found, as Cresswell had said, a large empty garret with bare brick walls, and in the further corner of it stood an iron cage, such as wild beasts are kept in, only higher. It was about 4 feet square and 8 in height, and there was an iron ring in the wall at the back, to which was attached an old rusty chain with a collar fixed to it. I confess, it made my blood creep when I thought of the possibility of any human being having inhabited it, and our old friend expressed as much horror as ourselves, assuring us that it must certainly have been constructed for some such dreadful purpose. As, however, we were no believers in ghosts, we all agreed that the noises must proceed from somebody who had an interest in keeping the house empty, and since it was very disagreeable to imagine that there were secret means of entering it at night, we resolved as soon as possible to look for another residence, and in the meantime to say nothing about the matter to anybody. About 10 days after this determination, my mother, observing one morning that Cresswell, when she came to dress her, looked exceedingly pale and ill, inquired if anything was the matter. "Indeed, my lady," she answered, "we have been frightened to death, and neither I nor Mrs. Marsh can sleep again in the room we are now in." "Well," returned my mother, "you shall both come and sleep in the little spare room next to us. What alarmed you?" "Oh, someone, my lady, went through our room in the night. We both saw the figure, but we covered our heads with our bedclothes and lay in a dreadful fright till morning." On hearing this, I could not help laughing, upon which Cresswell burst into tears, and seeing how nervous she was, we comforted her by saying we had heard of a good house, and that we were very soon to abandon our present habitation. A few nights afterwards, my mother requested me and Cresswell to go to her bedroom and fetch her frame, that she might prepare her work for the next day. It was after supper, and we were ascending the stairs by the light of a lamp which was always kept burning, when we saw going up before us a tall, thin figure, with hair flowing down his back, and wearing a loose powdering gown. We both at once concluded it was my sister Hannah, and called out, "It won't do, Hannah, you can't frighten us." Upon which the figure turned into a recess in the wall, but as there was nobody there when we passed, we concluded that Hannah had contrived somehow or other to slip and make her escape by the back stairs. On telling this to my mother, she said, "It was very odd, for Hannah went to bed with a headache after you came in from your walk." And, sure enough, on going to her room, there we found her fast asleep, and Alice, who was at work there, assured us that she had been so for more than an hour. On mentioning this circumstance to Cresswell, she turned quite pale, and exclaimed that that was precisely the figure that she and Marsh had seen in their bedroom. About that time, my brother Harry came in to spend a few days with us, and we gave him a room up another pair of stairs, at the opposite end of the house. A morning or two after his arrival, when he came down to breakfast, he asked my mother angrily whether she thought he went to bed drunk and could not put out his own candle, that she had sent those French rascals to watch him. My mother assured him that she never thought of doing such a thing, but he persisted in the accusation, adding, "Last night I jumped up and opened the door, and by the light of the moon through the skylight, I saw the fellow in his loose gown at the bottom of the stairs. If I had not been in my shirt, I would have gone after him, and made him remember coming to watch me." We were now preparing to quit the house, having secured another, belonging to a gentleman who was going to spend some time in Italy. But a few days before our removal, it happened that Mr. and Mrs. Atkins, some English friends of ours, called, to whom we mentioned these circumstances, observing how extremely unpleasant it was to live in a house that somebody found means of getting into. Though how they contrived it, we could not discover, nor what their motive could be except to frighten us, adding that nobody could sleep in the room Marsh and Cresswell had been obliged to give up. Upon this, Mrs. Atkins laughed heartily and said that she should like, of all things, to sleep there, if my mother would allow her, adding that with her little terrier she should not feel afraid of any ghost that ever appeared. As my mother had of course no objection to this fancy of hers, she requested Mrs. Atkins to ride home with the groom in order that the latter might bring her night things before the gates of the town would be shut. Mr. Atkins smiled and said that she was very bold, and his wife retired with her dog to her room when we retired to ours, apparently without the least apprehension. When she came down in the morning, we were immediately struck at seeing her look very ill, and on inquiring if she had too been frightened, she said she had been awakened in the night by something moving in her room, and that, by the light of the night lamp, she saw most distinctly a figure, and that the dog, which was spirited and flew at everything, never stirred, although she had endeavoured to make him. We saw clearly that she had been very much alarmed, and when Mr. Atkins came and endeavoured to dissipate the feeling by persuading her that she might have dreamed it, she got quite angry. We could not help thinking that she had actually seen something, and my mother said after she was gone that though she could not bring herself to believe it was really a ghost, she still earnestly hoped that she might get out of the house without seeing this figure which frightened people so much. We were now within 3 days of the one fixed for our removal. I had been taking a long ride, and being tired, had fallen asleep the moment I lay down. But in the middle of the night, I was suddenly awakened. I cannot tell by what, for the steps over our heads we had become so used to that it no longer disturbed us. Well, I awoke. I had been lying with my face towards my mother, who was asleep beside me, and, as one usually does on waking, I turned to the other side, where, the weather being warm, the curtain of the bed was undrawn. At the foot of the bed, I saw standing by a chest of drawers, which were betwixt me and the window, a thin, tall figure, in a loose powdering gown, one arm resting on the drawers, and the face turned towards me. I saw it quite distinctly by the nightlight, which burned clearly. It was a long, thin, pale, young face, with, such a melancholy expression as can never be effaced from my memory. I was, certainly, very frightened, but my great horror was lest my mother should awake and see the figure. I turned my head gently towards her and heard her breathing high in a sound sleep. Just then, the clock on the stairs struck 4 o'clock. I dare say it was nearly an hour before I ventured to look again, and when I did take courage to turn my eyes towards the drawers, there was nothing. Yet I had not heard the slightest sound, though I had been listening with the greatest intensity. As you may suppose, I never closed my eyes again, and glad I was when Cresswell knocked at the door, as she did every morning, for we always locked it, and it was my business to get out of bed and let her in. But on this occasion, instead of doing so, I called out, "Come in, the door is not fastened," upon which she answered that it was, and I was obliged to get out of bed and admit her as usual. When I told my mother what had happened, she was very grateful to me for not having wakened her, and commended me for my resolution. She, however, resolved not to risk another night at the house, and we got out of it that very day, after instituting, with the aid of the servants, a thorough search with a view to ascertain if there was any possible means of getting into the rooms except by the usual modes of ingress. But our search was in vain. None could be discovered. I think, from the errors in the names, etc., that the publisher of the accredited ghost stories must have obtained his account from the inhabitants of Lille. Thanks for joining me for these, and I will be back in the new year, hopefully with my final review of the book. Yes, it's taken a while, I'm afraid. But in the meantime, one last toast of good cheer for the upcoming new year. Until then, as always, please look after yourselves, look after one another, and take care.